I bet the Star Wars podcasts were so sad when Disney got rid of all the extended universe stuff.
They got rid of it?
Yeah,
like
so
non-canon?
Yeah, so when Disney,
fuck! I didn't know that. Holy shit!
When Disney bought them, right? Bought Lucas Films or whatever the hell, bought the rights to Star Wars, and they're like, we got to get rid of all this extended content so we can now make stuff in that space. So they said all of that, all those books, comics, and stuff that had been written before they bought them, now are no longer canon.
I think there's a lot of companies that have. Okay, you kind of tie yourself into shoot yourself in the foot, tie yourself into a knot. I was gonna mix those up, it didn't work out too well. Whenever you've got such a huge franchise with all these things out here, you're like, we want to write stuff, but there are these things that make it really difficult for our writers.
So couldn't they just adapt those?
It is free content.
There are some pretty good ones out
free
there.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people, like hardcore fans, enjoyed the most about it was the extended universe shit.
Yeah, the extended universe was pretty good.
But the Clone Wars stuff, like the animated series, is not gone, right?
No, that was made by Disney, I think.
Not the new one, the one that was like
on Cartoon
when
Network.
We were kids.
No, that is still there because they've expanded on it since.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's got some good stuff. It's weird. It straddles this line between childish and adult. It's in a weird space because some are super childish and like silly. Obviously, the Jar Jar episodes.
Yeah,
and then they got some really kind of more intense ones with like Darth Maul or whatnot.
Oh yeah, that's like a hallmark of a fun. Or all of the cartoons that I enjoyed from Cartoon Network, they were always like having that duality of, you know, if you watch this as an adult, it's like, but your kid's not going to get it. But it's like a 1-2 punch with the audience. You're going to have them when they're kids. When they get older, you're going to have a resurgence.
It's like Shrek. Like I loved it as a kid, but there were so many jokes that I just did not, that my mom's in the background going, ha ha. And I'm like, wow, that's not funny.
I'm still just fucked up about the dragon donkey children.
Like, what do you mean he's compensating for something that doesn't make any sense?
I don't know.
And now, you know, years later, I'm like, oh, it's talking about his dick.
You heard it here, folks.
Actually, no, because he's small and he's got a small penis. And then so he has a big tower because.
Talking about Farquaad?
Yeah. Remember, and they're walking up, he's like, oh, you think he's compensating for something?
Okay, I got you.
And I'm like, what? I don't get it. My mom's like, haha.
Yeah. Speaking of companies ignoring parts of things.
Whoa, nice.
There's been some tweets recently about the Wild Beyond the what is it?
Wild Beyond the Witchlight, what comes out today. If you're watching this episode, it is out currently. But before you buy it, watch this video because it might change your mind or it might sway you to check it out.
Yeah, because we in our games can go a few sessions at a time with a lot of different focuses. You know, maybe there's a lot of fighting, maybe there's not a lot of fighting.
There's a little bit of a break.
What we want to do.
Yeah.
But in a tweet that was made by Watsy, it was, I will pull it up.
The Twitter, Dungeons and Dragons Twitter, Wizards _DND.
So they said, all caps, what do you think, ... about an adventure without combat? And then peace.
Emojis.
Yeah. So a little.
And then they had the picture that's
bitey.
The Wild Beyond the Witchlight.
Framing for this. I don't know. Ryan sent me this and we were like, we could talk about this for an episode. And I was like,
Because it is an intriguing concept. Not only a whole quest or a whole session, one shot without combat, a whole necessarily campaign with no combat. That's quite the tall order.
Yeah. And I want to start this episode off with the first tweet pretty much below it that kind of summarizes how the entire thread goes. At Jamie Charles EL1, an adventure with half the content normal ones have that also nerfs a bunch of classes built around combat. Pass from me, I'll be honest.
Okay.
And many tweets after that are essentially this.
So a lot of drama.
A bit more aggressively, a bit more nicely.
Watsy was definitely stirring, their social media manager was stirring the pot with this tweet. That's for sure.
There's a tweet literally, he's Ryan.
Yeah, damn it. He's Braxton.
As the Dungeon Crawl today, we will be talking about
campaigns with no combat.
Yeah, campaigns. Whoa, like a whole ass campaign.
That's what this is.
This is an adventure without combat.
Yeah, but it's a whole campaign.
You're shitting me.
Yeah.
Like
the Wild Beyond the Witchlight is like a Curse of Strahd book. So it's a whole story.
What we need to clarify.
Imagine Curse of Strahd with no combat. I mean, obviously it has to be tweaked a lot, but that's basically what this is going to be. It's a whole adventure. Let me double check to see what the levels are on it, but you clarify whatever you're going to clarify.
If it's not milestone based, if they don't have milestones written into the adventure,
they don't usually.
Are they going to give XP values for?
It's levels 1 through 8. So usually the way the adventure modules work for WotC, so usually they'll say
Let's define that.
so they'll do. I'm curious actually. I've never done the math. I think it's probably XP based as well. But it's also, I guess you could in theory do it milestone based, because they'll say they make it to this village or to this chapter. If the party goes through this chapter, they should in theory be level 4, something like that. So like if you go to Barovia, the whatever the main city in Barovia is, you got to be level 4 or something. And if you go to the wine garden place, you should be level 8. Or if you go to the Amber Temple, you should be level 10. Something along those lines.
So adventures aren't really restricted based on level, right? It's just a story that they've got. It doesn't have to be a full ass campaign. It can be a section of a campaign, right?
Like
you and I are running something right now. We're like level 2. We had your own warm-up dungeon, and you're like, okay, I want to now throw Beyond the Witchlight in.
A good example of that is what we did in our last campaign. You guys played till like what, level 5 or 6? I don't know. And then I tossed Curse of Strahd in.
Oh, yeah.
We a very truncated version of Curse of Strahd, but we did do a lot of the Strahdy mechanics. So you could easily take a lot of these and homebrew them and put them into your own world. But I do honestly believe that the majority of people buy these books and play them out of the box.
Yeah.
I think people just pick them up, go get some friends together. So the idea of picking up Wild Beyond the Witchlight and it not having any combat in it could be quite the twist for people, especially if you did not know that ahead of time.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people that just buy things like you said and run it, everything, because we're gonna buy WotC's stuff. They've got our wallets tied because of this podcast, and we enjoy reading their stuff. But despite their clickbaity tweet that they had, one of the tweets is very buried down.
To be fair, though, before this tweet came out, they did. This is technically, this first tweet is a part of a thread, and the second tweet that they added to it is a video with Chris Perkins, who is the main author, who also wrote Curse of Strahd. Writes a lot of great stuff. Talked about this in the combat section at the very, very beginning, and he said,
drops it,
he said, quote, allows you to not have to resort to combat to solve your problems. He said that's what their goal was. So the tweet originally makes it sound like there's like they've taken out combat time, which I guess you can in theory do Feywild like magic. So you can't take out your weaponry, whatever. No violence in the Feywild Carnival here.
It's just smart exposure. Like there's quintessential social media post.
It's definitely a little clickbaity. Because he said they wanted to add make an adventure with non-combat options, which if you stretch it, every adventure they've ever done gives it that, but not out of the box. There's definitely homebrew stuff you'd have to do or improv on the fly.
When I heard that in the video, my thought was, how many adventures do they have that you can complete or finish the main thing without killing that thing or fighting it?
None.
And I genuinely thought, I want to say like
with Strahd
you could definitely improv some of it.
Yes.
And there's always room to change it,
but
which
rules
is
as written, no.
Yeah, I guess that's the context I should put it in, because our perspective, and at least my perspective, is if they print a book, there's no reason that you're not plagiarizing anything, you're not broadcasting, you can change it if you want.
Yeah. Read the tweet actually.
Yeah. Well, my first example was like Rhymer the Frostman. Like, there's no way.
No. Curse of Strahd, you got to kill Strahd.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you don't have to. You could all die. A lot of the ones from Candlekeep, just straight combat kind of stuff. There's a few RP ones, but there's still combat within them.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Yeah, and the tweet echoes what they said in the video, so it's not too much of an impactor at the moment. But somebody says, at Alpha Talking, didn't watch the video, so does this module contain no combat encounters? D&D responds, there are plenty of encounters to be had if you prefer combat. Each encounter, however, also offers options for peaceful or clever resolution instead. And it's so interesting to me because I always feel limited when they give me those options as like a player. I want to come up with it on my own. I don't want to have the DM try to pigeonhole me into like the one clever option or the one peaceful option or the fight. I want to make my own fate.
Yeah, have some gray morality in there. You need to decide where you lie.
Is it better that they did provide it so they can,
Well, that's the interesting thing here with this is when I heard this, I was like, interesting. And then I was thinking, I think I maybe talked to you about this in D&D or whatever, but I remember my belief was that they're going to be adding more options.
Yes.
But they are not. There are no new play. As far as I'm aware, no new player. Granted, it's not out yet. No new player non-combat options. I think the non-combat options come into just the story and the world and the conversations you could have.
Well, if you watch their video, some of the examples of things that might happen that they spoiled, there's like a snail race art in the background. You can imagine
a lot
that.
of rabbit folk.
I mean, really, in D&D, if you're rolling dice and trying to meet a random score that the DM has from the book, is that not just the same as combat? You're still rolling stuff. Is it? You're rolling dice like, who's upset?
I mean, yes and no. So
playing devil's advocate.
So there was a tweet also on this thread that I saw where someone said that this could be a good adventure for kids. But my confusion comes, I'm pretty sure they advertised this by saying that it was going to be like a horror-themed adventure in the Feywild. Mm-hmm. The horror is generally not good for kids.
No.
So I'm not entirely sure if that fits well. But going back to the video, Chris Perkins, and this is not a Wild Beyond the Witchlight impressions or a
it's mostly a discussion on without.
Yeah, so I'm going to get past the Witchlight stuff in a minute, but I'm going to say Chris Perkins did say a few interesting stuff in that video about making a campaign or adventure without combat. He said that you need to give the players goals that are non-lethal. So, for example, Strahd being, I need to kill Strahd to save everybody. That's a lethal goal. So a non-lethal one could be, help the farmer get a good crop this season or something. And to do that, you gotta go get water. Or, I don't know.
Just don't make it fetch quests.
Or help the rain god allow for rain in the area. I don't know. There's some options.
Yeah.
Do some detective work. There's some interesting stuff there. But then he also said that you need to have likable villains because then the players will not want to kill them.
Well, why are you calling them villains then? Just call them NPCs.
Yeah, that's true.
Which doesn't change. What might not change their perspective narratively. It's entirely fine to not have a villain and let the players decide.
But if you're having an adventure, you gotta have the villain. But the problem with that, I think, is just like. This really goes back to what I'll say here later is about having a session 0 with your party, because if you play this adventure with a standard group of individuals, and granted, again, haven't read it, I don't know how they lay out these non-combat options, but there's the old tried and true saying that if you put a creature in front of your players, they will want to kill it.
Now, is that a product
the gods need to have a stat block because the players will want to kill the gods.
A product of the context that D&D is in as a game, or because humanity is evil and they want to kill things?
Maybe a mix of both. It is, D&D is very much like a power fantasy.
Yeah.
That I want to be the strongest individual. If that guy is threatening my friends or my NPCs that I really like, I want to mess him up.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you that question that came up in my mind is no context, no session 0. Don't ever do this. But if you, Ryan, are wanting to make a character, what draws you to that class option in the race the most? How do you make your decision? Now, this is probably not the best person to ask because it might lean more towards the non-combat side of things, but I still want to hear his answer.
So with no session 0?
No, if you're just like,
so you have not
I want to have
that there's no combat.
I'm just, you're in your own room and you've decided I want to make a character right now and just have it in my pocket. If there's ever a campaign that runs around and fits this is the guy that I want to play. This is my most favorite thing.
The problem, so there's a lot of great options, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is most of the ones that I would probably pick, I'd say the majority of the D&D options are combat focused.
Yeah.
There's very few that aren't. And so if you don't have the session 0, for example, like we're just speculating, the player might show up with a really cool fighter class or barbarian class, and now they can't rage. There's no reason to rage anymore.
Good.
For what purpose? It wouldn't even last if they're not getting hit. It lasts for a round.
Well, I mean, it's realistic. There's going to be some aggressive people in the world if they get transferred to the Feywild.
But I can rage without my ability. I can just say I'm angry, DM.
I'm angry. Yeah, it's true. So
you'd have to homebrew it. There's have to be some other options.
Yeah, that's true. I think the oddity is that if you have a session 0 and you mentioned there's not going to be a ton of combat, there are some spells that people usually don't take that people can take that will absolutely, you're saying, but will absolutely make this a fucking cakewalk. If every single player takes like suggestion, I wouldn't be surprised if almost every single person, and it kind of makes sense in context, if every single NPC in this has a pretty big resistance to being charmed.
Like Feywild.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So maybe that's why they picked this as the environment. It would be as easy just to say.
But what if you're not a spellcaster?
Oh, you're fucked.
You feel pretty useless, I would imagine.
Yeah, what are you going to do? I don't know, chop down tree with your big axe?
Yeah, Johnny over here is super excited to play his fighter ranger hybrid class, and now he can't do any of it.
Yeah, so more so than ever, Session 0 is incredibly important.
Yes.
In this case. I would come in with a Warlock. I'm ready to Eldritch Blast some shit.
Right. But he did finish this section. Chris Perkins did finish this section saying if a party wanted to hack and slash its way through, that they can. I feel like most people probably will, at least in certain instances. Of course, I think it'll be like most campaigns where there's some times where you want to fight and kill people, and other times it's like, let's be friendly this time. I don't. But it does. So the Wild Beyond the Witchlight comes out today. We'll review it next week. But this does bring up an interesting conundrum that we've kind of been batting around here. Yeah. Is it possible to run an adventure or a full campaign without combat, or should you just be playing a separate system entirely?
So there's two different questions there. So it is entirely possible to do it.
Okay.
Should you use something else? Yes.
All right. Now let's dissect those questions.
Yeah, let's go. So the first one, is it possible? There's nothing in D&D that says you can't try and solve everything without combat. You might die just because sometimes there's a monster that just wants to kill and eat you. And if you can't get them off of your friend, they're dead.
The interesting thing that the reason I think that this has become such a big talking point with this, besides this tweet in the video, because before, in my mind, at the very least, before this video came first, I saw this tweet and Chris Perkins was chatting about adventure without combat. That's just D&D to me, that you have options presented in front of you. You can choose to fight. You can choose to not fight. Both have consequences. Both have positive and negative effects. You got to pick and choose. I like having the kind of gray area aspect, but he did bring up an interesting point that in their own games and their own books, they haven't really offered these without, again, rules as written. Yeah. So the DM would then have to work to think, okay, the party didn't fight these hags. What would the hags be doing? And then they try to parlay with the hags. Maybe they convince the hags to, help them in some way. That's obviously not in the book. So it's all in the DM improv at that point, I guess.
So you telling me that they have actually put more work into giving solutions to the DM rather than saying, oh, you can make up your own option?
Sounds like it. Granted, we have not read it.
That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, like I've always said, Chris Perkins is a good author, so that's why I'm holding out hope for this book.
Yeah,
I'd much rather it be a Feywild source material book like the Ravenloft one we got, but I'm interested to see where he goes with this for levels 1 through 8.
If you've been in the social media echo chamber and that was your only opinion that you've seen on it, and you're the type of person that gets imprinted on those sorts of things and you're not super excited about it, let what Ryan just said kind of flip it on its head. They're actually writing more into this rather than contrasting the Shadowfell one in Ravenloft. Mm-hmm. It was just, hey, you do your own thing. You make all of this. And I think it's so interesting because this book is turning out to be probably a very stark opposite. It's not how to run the Feywild, it's an adventure within it. So maybe that's a part of the reason.
Just kind of interesting.
As a guide.
Chris Perkins, he wrote the Strahd book and the Shadowfell. Now he's writing one in the Feywild. Where does the Planar Worlds take him next?
I don't know. Planescape? Probably not.
Probably
the second question, what was it?
Should you just play a different system?
So at Michael Civil.
Yeah, what's up, Michael?
On Twitter. So many of the game's character mechanics are built around combat, like we've discussed.
Yes.
As are many of the game's obstacles. You have a core rulebook called a monster manual, for Christ's sake, he says.
Oh, is that what FCS means?
Yeah, I had to think about it for a bit. What are you adding to the game in place of combat? If the answer is nothing, I don't think it would work. And there's several other tweets around this one that say, go play 3.5e, go play Call of Cthulhu, go play other things that have mechanics.
Pathfinder.
Yeah, for social encounters. D&D almost literally has none outside of a charisma or persuasion.
They do specifically say in the DM's guide to make sure if your party does circumvent a fight to with role playing whatever to still award them the XP. So at least they've mentioned that somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll have something in the book that directly addresses it either in the beginning or around where your character should be getting XP for the first time, for the DM in particular.
You mentioned Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
I do have that here in my notes. The problem with that is if you're enjoying the possibility of combat list D&D is for children, that is probably a very bad system for children to be playing.
Yeah.
The reason actually I bring this up is because I've seen multiple tweets, and not part of this thread, but tweets and Reddit threads of people talking about how they have a D&D club at their school, and some group, some parental organization heard of it and said that they have to have no combat. You can't fight, which then people retorted saying, grab your history teacher and say you teach them all about wars and stuff. And
yeah, you can't teach wars in history class. Yeah, that's a really good counter. And
there are also prisons that won't allow D&D because you could and technically I guess you could in theory have a power fantasy of killing people, but
yeah,
most of the prisoners that are playing D&D are not doing that. They're just having a fun time in jail. So yeah, it gets pretty ridiculous with how people view D&D. So going back to Call of Cthulhu, does that mean? Because first of all, we have not played Call of Duty, but we are preparing to play it soon.
Yes, we've made characters. We've had our session 0.
Yeah, we are going to have a deep dive on Call of Cthulhu later after we play it. But the reason why combat is so, that's even in the conversation here, is because combat in Call of Cthulhu is so deadly and ill-advised. Because if you're not fighting, creatures beyond our imagination, you're fighting cultists that worship those creatures beyond our imagination.
Yeah.
And that's is the only way you make combat ill-advised or have a campaign without combat, to make it so incredibly terrifying and painful that the party just doesn't want to and they run all the time. I don't know if that's also the option.
That was a justification in some of the threads on the tweet as well, was if you're going to have no combat, the players might not enjoy it because they oftentimes only resort to non-combat when combat is too scary or instant death.
Like sneaking through an area, because if you don't sneak, you fight a billion guards or something.
So to that extent, like, what's the incentive for non-combat? Compelling villains was one that they gave. I'm interested to see what else they put in there.
I guess happy NP. Maybe they're making it such a gray area that you don't want to kill anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about the real world, which isn't exactly like D&D, I will say, so maybe not the best comparison, but think about your everyday life. How often do you need to resort to combat? Again, very different context, but there's only a certain amount of people in the world that have to resort to combat.
To a limit,
yeah. So it's not unrealistic to think there might be a situation like that in D&D, but you are in the Feywild where crazy shit happens. So,
and you do all have weapons and you have abilities that allow you to fight. You fireball, for Christ's sake. I mean,
do you think, like, if you did a session 0 for this, would you try and suggest your players make characters that, I mean, of course, would try to protect themselves, but traditionally in their life have not needed to use combat or like evocation magic?
Yeah,
or anything?
I think you'd probably, granted, again, this is from 2 people that haven't read the adventure, but I think you'd probably want, not even just for this adventure, for non-combat.
For non-combat.
You'd probably want to tell them, to make someone that would not resort to violence. It's like it was the first response, that this would be something that if they're pushed to a limit, which could be a fun, interesting mechanic or role-playing idea, as a DM to push that to near the end of it, like you push them to a limit, like kind of like Joker and Batman. You keep pushing them farther and farther.
Is he gonna do it? Is he gonna kill someone?
If they have their morals, what's gonna happen? That's definitely not kid friendly, but kind of cool. But there's some, you'd want to tell them maybe a farmhand or some low, chill peasant guy who's coming up, or an accountant. I don't know, something. You definitely want to have the evil villain barbarian guy coming into this party. This would not be a good one for evil aligned characters, I would imagine.
So what are you rewarding your players with for solving these encounters and stuff?
XP. Now, I would imagine they're gonna have items. They're gonna have story tidbits, hopefully.
The satisfaction of closing a story, maybe, I guess, but
I mean, it could be something like Divinity-wise, that you could kill the NPC that could have a cool story arc, but if you kill him, you don't get to learn those two, or Fall New Vegas, that type of stuff where you could just cut a whole story short. Granted, you can't save and reload.
I mean, you could always run it again in a different concept, but D&D's a bit slower of a slog than a video game would be to restart. I don't think they would do that for A, that reason. I'd love them to, and B, it takes a lot of time and writing to make a story that works when you take a piece out.
Yeah, if this guy is still alive at this point, he's gonna be doing this. If not, then
I can see it happening. Yeah, if they're gonna have 3 kind of solutions for each encounter, I'm interested to see how web-like the whole book gets.
Yeah, how easy it will be to navigate and read.
Yeah, and in general, like combat not existing in a campaign, I don't think I would have a lot of motivation unless it was a character I've played for ages. If you took our current home game where we've played for like almost, or at least me and another person played for almost 5 years. If you said you guys are really powerful, magic gets erased from the world and you are normal people, or you get transported to another world, I would love doing non-combat because I know that character. It's fun to play as. Like that's 5 years of work in order for me to want to do a non-combat game. So I don't.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, and we kind of touched on it earlier. That this is us talking about a hypothetical long-term adventure or campaign with no combat, but DMs out there, there's plenty of room for you to have non-combat arcs in your games. You could have one of my favorite ways to describe it is make the combat mean something. So don't just throw in random encounters. Have that random encounter mean something, add to the plot, add to the story, whatever. Which can be add to some work. But it's very rewarding to have combat arcs where the players are trying to kill the big bad thing, and then after that, recover from that and have a role-playing arc for like 4 or 5 sessions with no combat, and then that all leads up to a cool combat encounter. That's always fun and rewarding. Yeah. So it's definitely don't feel like you have to have combat 24/7.
No, absolutely
unless
not.
your players just want that.
Sometimes I'm looking for number crunching and
sometimes you just want to punch something.
But that's just because like 80% of my class is centered around that.
Yeah. Role-playing can only take you so far.
Absolutely. And something interesting back when the Unearthed Arcana came out with the rabbit folk in them or whatever they're called. He told a story in the video, Chris Perkins did, that they're like, this is not a like happy-go-lucky like rabbit folk. Like,
they almost didn't include them.
They almost didn't include them. But people were like, we want to play that. He's like, okay, let's do it. And in conjunction with that, knowing that they weren't initially putting it in, that's probably why the jump ability is so bonkers and like weird and doesn't work, especially in combat.
Maybe it'll be different.
Could be different.
That was the beta.
It could be different, but it specifically was weird in combat. And it kind of makes sense now with this context.
If there's not much combat,
Yeah, I'm interested to see, like, do you need to make stat blocks for a non-combat campaign at all?
They probably will.
I guess.
Just in case. Another system you could play, though, would be there's some Powered by the Powered by the Apocalypse offerings out there for you to check out.
Even combat is almost non-combat.
Yeah, it's very described and flavorful.
Yeah, the ways you die or get harmed are by falling too much into a certain ideal or personality trait. It's like, okay, it makes sense in the system, I promise. But
yeah, it's the Avatar one.
Yeah.
But so let's say you decide to make a full 5e D&D 5e adventure. You've listened to this episode, this podcast, and you're convinced that you're gonna go with it. I think if you're going to, you need to either homebrew a lot.
Oh my god, you need to make new classes.
Or B, Brax is on the right path here. There's a lot of this is a niche that exists. There are third-party options for non-combat people. There's a PDF out there called The Gift of Gab that is all about like new talking mechanics and how persuasion and stuff and deception can work. There's also another one, I can't remember what it's called, but different ways to use skills that exist. Kind of like, those of you who don't know Call of Cthulhu might not know this reference, but Call of Cthulhu has all these different skills, and you have to kind of flavor how you're using the skill if you're going to do stuff with it. And obviously, you can do that already in D&D, but this gives you written options for you to think about, okay, I can use acrobatics not only for climbing or jumping from place to place, but I can also use this to, do something else. But there's some really, really cool ones. I'm curious why has WotC never really prioritized non-combat until now? Did they just realize we're out of combat ideas? Let's go the opposite direction?
I think somebody threw it on the table and they're like, yeah, let's go with it. And they gave...
Probably Chris Perkins was like, I'm sick and tired of writing killing vampire stories. Let me write something fun.
Yeah, I don't think it was anything like a vendetta or just them being bored or tired, because the reason they've been doing it for so long is their game is built around combat. Like 80% of it is. If you make
it's
a character,
Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, you can't.
You couldn't go in the dungeon and say, hi, dragon. Bye, dragon. I don't know. That's not as fun.
Dungeons aren't safe, man. They got oozes and traps.
I don't know. It's the odd thing about all this for me is D&D, and the reason like why I'm going to final statement say play something else if you want only combat is that if you make a character, they're going to have some way to kill something.
Right. This type of game really requires some player buy-in.
Yeah.
It can't just be you spring it on your players like halfway into a campaign or something. It has to be something you've sat down with the group and be like, all right, this could be kind of fun if we tried a whole adventure without combat. Let's, test out the water, see how it goes.
So are you even playing a game at that point though? In the context of D&D?
Improving?
Yeah. Like how much of it is going to be a game? Or is it just going to be you guys doing improv around and collaboratively writing story, which isn't bad at all. Like that's fun.
But if you're playing D&D, you got the dice out, you got to touch them.
How often are you doing that? Like persuasion check? And to some extent, like
insight checks.
For me, that takes the fun out of social encounters if you're playing people that are good at yes-anding. And
right.
I mean, you're speaking and your DM decides like that was a convincing argument. I don't need him to roll anything for that.
Right.
Unless you just really want to number crunch at that point. But it's so weird to me.
You could detect thoughts a lot. I mean, that could be cool.
There's so many things in this that make it sound like it's going to be too easy for people that spec entirely for non-combat.
Yeah, the story definitely, going back to the player buy-in, the story definitely has to be enthralling enough that the players don't feel the need to attack people. It has to be done in such an exquisite manner that's a tough line to walk across.
Yeah. I mean, it's purely leaning on the story. So if you want to try your story shop, say, hey, players.
If anyone can do it, Chris Perkins can.
Yeah.
Though his Candlekeep Adventure whistle. Yeah,
Which one was his?
His was the one where you walk into that Shadowfell teleport and there's like, I don't know, it's like 4 gargoyles outside, 10 ghouls.
Oh, they fucking murder
at like
you?
level 4. And this is the non-combat guy.
Yeah. So
maybe he made that and was like, you know what? Fuck it, I can't do that. I'm not writing combat shit anymore.
I don't know, man. I'm interested because if he's going to write such a compelling story that even I, who isn't super intrigued about the Feywild that much, gets into it, let's do it. Interested. But if it's just like, let's do a snail race and, yay. We'll see.
Yeah, this story, this adventure is based around the Feywild Carnival.
Oh, yeah.
That things go haywire in, I guess.
You think they would write more than 2 backgrounds?
Yeah, it's only 2 backgrounds.
There's if you're going to do a non-combat campaign, homebrew, again, that's the biggest. Homebrew something. It's
more than Curse of Strahd.
Tangible.
Curse of Strahd had 1.
Yeah, but, they got weapons and skills and classes and stuff. And it's just like, I'm going to write you a story. You feel free to walk through it.
Right.
Go ahead. I don't know.
Well, we'll read it. Hopefully, if things go well, we will be reviewing it here next week. So if you are still on the fence, not entirely sure, well, let us spend the money for you, and we will review it. Tell you if you should buy it, if you should check it out, if you're a player, if you should find a DM that's playing this and hop into their game. Because this is the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Of D&D fans will be a little overwhelmed deciding where to spend their money because we got this book, then we got Fizzband's Treasury of Dragons, and then we got the Strixhaven book. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. So if you're still stripped for cash, then listen to the podcast. We'll tell you what to buy.
If we really love one of them, we might.
Yeah, there's one that blows our mind
see
away.
If somebody wants to, take one off our hands. I don't know. Kenneth might be here if he's got the time to jump in. He reminded me that he is interested. So
yeah,
could have him in person for the first time again. See how that goes. Anyways. If you want to join this discussion with us in particular, like on tweeters and whatnot, it's at Dungeon Crawl Pod for both Twitter and Instagram. We post some updates on Twitter, for the most part, Instagram. Take some funky photos. Ryan points a camera at me and don't know what's happening, and then it's on the internet, which is fun. And then if you want to get really into discussions with us and maybe play some tabletop RPGs, there is the Discord where we've got several things going on, like the Call of Cthulhu thing, which you just missed kind of a sign up for.
It will be streamed
in the Discord.
Yeah, in the Discord on, let me double check the date real fast. It'll be on the 2nd.
Yeah.
October 2nd.
Yeah, so if you want to join in and watch that.
At noon 1 p.m. noon CST? I don't know, one of the two.
Something like that.
We'll post in the Discord, you can find it.
And where else we go? Email thedungeoncrawlpod@gmail.com if you want to send your inquiries about businesses and whatnot. Or just,
if you want to sponsor us for whatever reason.
Let's be pen pals, right? Non-combat stories, and then play them for people.
Yeah.
Outside of that, if you want to support us with, gold, monetary, I don't know. If you want to subscribe to us on Patreon, you can definitely do that. It's a way to support us that helps us pay for subscriptions like this. Hey, look, these are our Dungeon Crawler tier and above people as they scroll by. Squid, of course, thank you for always setting up there, helping us out. Haven't seen you in a bit. Love you. Hope you're doing good. Hope everybody else is doing good. That's my spiel. That was a pretty good spiel, man. Yeah.
Speaking of spiels, there's one thing you should know if you do go into the Feywild. Fey creatures love to just, gab. Oh, okay, true.
Yeah.
But they also like to talk, like to chew your. They like the opposite, or they like devil light, where they like talking a lot and they'll make bargains with you, but it's not necessarily a contract. It's like, hey, will you do this thing for me? I'm like, hey, sure.
That's the start of the campaign.
That's how you make bargains. Yeah. Well, I was walking away from. So I go to college, grad school. And Braxton's aware of this college. It's very hot around this time of year.
Yeah, a lot of pollen.
And so I was walking back to my car because I wanted to get home. And I'm not sure if I was hallucinating because of the heat stroke I was experiencing.
Damn, was it that hot?
It was like 99 today.
That's not bad. That's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad when you're walking from really far away and walking across campus. And then you get to campus and you're stinky and you're gross because you've been sweating the whole walk. Ugh, what a joke. But I didn't know if I was hallucinating or if there was actually a fey creature in front of me. And we had a conversation. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we ended up making a bargain, right? The bargain was that they will take me to my car.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was like,
AC already turned on?
Yes, ready to go. I was like, please, if you can do anything for me, do this. And their side of the bar was like, sure, yeah, definitely. But you got to, when you get home, rate the Dungeon Crawl 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. I said, well, I'm the guy.
I'm the guy. I got two
from,
thumbs.
I've
got
already,
2 thumbs. Is ready to do that and get in their car and drive home.
I'll do it. And I did. When I got home, I rated 5 stars. I got a cat here as well. Very excited to see me. So for those of you out there, if you want to appease the Fey lords and ladies, then please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, and it'll help us out. Write a little review, and we'll get ranked up a little higher in the algorithm for people.
Maybe.
Which, speaking of algorithm, thank you all for liking and commenting our videos. We've been getting a lot of new eyes, a lot of new faces on the podcast lately. That's super fun.
Yeah, that's why I love the Discord, because it's where eventually people that constantly comment on our videos, they jump in. It's like, hey,
I've been commenting on your videos the last 10 weeks.
Yeah. But as always, he's Ryan.
He's Braxton. We're the Dungeon Crawl. Thanks for crawling with us. And we'll be back next week, like I said, unless things go awry, which has happened before. If we've dived into this book and it happens to be a little bigger than anticipated.
I don't think it will. There's no
you never know. We will be reviewing Wild Beyond the Witchlight next week.
Yeah.
Should be a good fun time. I'm gonna double check to see how long, how many pages it is. Let me check the old Amazon.com link.
Do they know?
Yeah.
Is it just readily available on Amazon?
Yeah, it's always there if you ever want to see how long it is.
It's so interesting. It's $30 on D&D Beyond and in hardcover. It's so
well, only on Amazon. If you go to your local game store, it's full price, and that's how they screw over the local game store people. So if you have the money, definitely go to your local game store and purchase it. It's down here. Sorry, I hadn't scrolled up. Stalking.
This pictures look cool. I like these. It's a cat.
It is. Oh, they don't have it. Oh, let me type pages. Oh, they don't have it.
That's suspicious.
Normally they do. Yeah, that's so weird. Well, my guess is around 300 pages. That's
really?
my guess.
Yeah, I can see it.
I mean, most of their adventures are around 300s. Though it is levels 1 through 8, which is definitely less than normal. Because Horde of the Dragon Queen was 1 through 8, and then Tyranny of Dragons or something like that was 8 through 16, so technically it's 1 through 16 adventure.
Yeah. Level 8's a good level. So
Strahd was like 1 through 10, I think, something like that. 1 through 12, I don't know.
All right.
But it's usually a lot. So I'm intrigued to see. Maybe it is shorter. We'll see. We'll find out.
Not if they have more options for solving encounters. Anyways.
Head over to D&D Beyond and buy it now if you want, or your local game store, and tell us what you think in the comments below. But don't spoil anything because we're going to review it next week.
Don't do that. Deuces.
Take care, everybody.